Hi there, folks. In today's lesson, we're going to be looking at circles, and more specifically, we're going to be looking at graphing circles. And the first thing we need to talk about is what a circle is. A circle is just a set of points that are all equal distance from a center point. Okay, so if I have a center point and I start measuring out the same distance in every direction, what I start to get is I start to get this array of points, and that array of points starts to come together and form what we know as a circle. So it's really just a set of points, and all those points start to collide together and form this curve. That's what a circle is. Okay. The radius of the circle is the line that extends from the center to the circle itself, or the circumference of the circle. The diameter, like the radius, it goes through the center, but this one goes the entire way across. So the end points are on the circumference of the circle, and it passes through the center of the circle. Okay. Radius starts at the center and goes to the outside. The diameter goes the entire way across. And our formula for the circle, which we can take right off of our formula sheet, is this, where we have x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. And keep in mind that in this formula, our center is hk, and our radius is the r value. Okay, so we have a center at hk and a radius given by this r value. So when we look at this thing, keep in mind that there's minus signs in here, so we're kind of taking the opposite of this thing, just like we do in vertex form. The r value, it's r squared in my formula, so I'll have to take the square root of that to get my r value. All right. For example, when I look at something like this guy, I might be going to identify two things in order to graph this: the center and the radius. All right. And as I look at this thing, this is in my standard form. I might not recognize it as such just the way it is, but remember, x squared is the same thing as like x minus 0 squared. And y squared is the same thing as y minus 0 squared. Let me try that again. Y minus 0 squared. And then keep in mind here, this is a 9. That's my r squared. So when I look at this thing, I can see hk. So the center right here is hk, which is 0, 0. The radius, again, this right here, this guy, is my r squared, so r squared equals 9, which in order to find my r value, then I have to take the square root of each side, so r would equal a 3 in this scenario. Okay. When I go to graph this thing, I plot the center at 0, 0. And then the radius, I want to just measure out in every direction 3 units. The problem is that I can't measure diagonally because I can't count 3 units on a diagonal. So what I do is I count 3 units in every direction that I can. I count up 3 units, and I count down 3 units, and I can count to the left 3 units and to the right 3 units. And so what I do is I plot as many points as I can, and now I'm just going to draw the best circle that I can draw. And hopefully that's good enough. And notice it's not perfect. I mean, it looks pretty good, and it looks like I've done a nice job drawing my circle, but it's not perfect. And that's all I'm expecting from you. We want to try to draw it so it looks like a circle, and it's a circle that has a radius of 3 and a center of 0, 0. And that's it. I count in every direction I can, and I draw the best circle that I can. Don't be lazy and draw something that looks like this. That is not a circle. What I have drawn in red is not a circle. That is a blob diamond. And that is no good. Try to make it look like a circle as best you can. Okay? If I look at the next one, again, I'm going to identify the center and the radius. So the center of this one, again, this is going to be 2, -1. And the reason for that is because there's a minus sign built into the formula. This is x minus h. This one is y minus k. It's like y minus a -1. See, y minus my k value is a -1. So remember, I always just take the opposite of whatever's written there. And then right here, this is my r squared. So if r squared equals 4, it means that my r value, my radius, is a 2 because I take the square root of that thing. Okay? So now I go to my graph. I've got 2, -1. So 2, -1 is right here. I've got a radius of 2. I measure that in every direction that I can. So up 2, down 2, to the left 2, and to the right 2. So I plot these 4 values, and then I just do my best. I draw the best circle that I feel like I can draw. And that's it. There's my circle. Okay? So I plot the center, I count the radius in every direction that I can, and I draw the best circle that I can. All right? If I have an equation that's not quite in standard form, what I have to do is I have to rewrite it in standard form. So to put the equation in standard form, what I have to do is I have to complete the square twice. So I'm completing the square twice. Because I have an x squared and I have a y squared, I have to complete the square with each of these, and that's why I'm completing the square twice. So if I look at the first example here, when I'm completing the square, the first thing I always do is I create space by moving the constant terms. So in this one, I'm going to add this 3 to each side. I'm also going to subtract the 1 from each side. I'm creating space. I'm getting the constant terms out of the way. So what I have then is x squared plus 4x with a little bit of space. So I'm creating space. And then I have the plus y squared minus 6y with a little bit of space. Equals, over here, now that I've moved that stuff over, that's going to give me a 4. And now I complete the square. Remember, to complete the square, to fill in these blanks, I have to do b divided by 2 and square it. So I take this middle term, which is a 4. I divide it by 2, which is a 2. And then I square that, which gives me a 4. So I have to add a 4 in this little blank space. All right? I do the same thing with the next value. I take the b value, which is the negative 6. I divide it by 2, which is a negative 3. And then I square it, which gives me a positive 9. So I'm going to do a plus 9 right here. All right? So I do b divided by 2 and square it. The thing I have to remember now is that whatever I do to one side, I have to do the other side. So right here, I added a 4 to this side. I have to add a 4 to this side. I added a 9 also to this side. I have to add a 9 to this side. Okay, whatever I do to one side, I have to do the other side. That's the step that we tend to forget. So make sure you're doing the same thing to each side of the equation. And now I do a little bit of factoring. This first trinomial, the x squared plus 4x plus 4, factors into an x plus 2 times x plus 2, which is x plus 2 squared. The second trinomial, the y squared minus 6y plus 9, factors into a y minus 3 times y minus 3, which is y minus 3 squared. Equals, over here I add this all up. I have 4 plus 4, which is 8, plus the 9, looks like a 17. All right? And so now I can see this thing in standard form. I can identify the center. The radius for this one is going to be a decimal, and that's okay. That happens sometimes when we go to plot this thing. We got to round some things off in order to graph it. Okay? If I look at the next one, once again, I'm going to complete the square. So the first thing I do is I create space by moving the constant term. So I'm going to add this 5 to each side. Just one constant term to move this time. And while I'm at it, since I'm writing this down and leaving these blank spaces in, I'm going to reorganize this thing. Right now I have an x squared followed by an 8y, which doesn't make any sense. I want to gather these things together. So I'm going to write it as x squared minus 2x with a little space. So I put my x values together. Plus, I'll do the y squared plus the 8y with a little bit of space. So I'm just kind of gathering these things together, equals the 13. Now I do b divided by 2 and square it. Negative 2 divided by 2 is a 1, or negative 1. Negative 1 squared is a positive 1. So I put a plus 1 here. The next value, I do 8 divided by 2 and square it. So b divided by 2 and square it, that gives me a 4 squared, which is 16. Whatever I do to one side, I have to do the other side. So over here, I also have to add the 1 and the 16. And now I factor the x squared minus 2x plus 1 is going to factor into an x minus 1 squared. The y squared plus 8y plus 16 is going to factor into a y plus 4 squared. And then over here, I simply add these guys together. It looks like it gives me a 30. And now this thing is in standard form. I can see the center at 1, negative 4. The radius, once again, I would take the square root of that 30. So it would be a decimal approximation. Okay? But now it's in standard form. So let's pull all this together. Let's put this thing in standard form, and then we're going to graph it. All right? So the first thing I want to do is create some space. So I'll add the 1 to each side. I'll subtract the 3 from each side. So I'm creating space. I'm moving those constant terms over. I'm going to reorganize a little bit. So I've got x squared. I've got a plus 6x, and I'll leave a little space. I've got a plus y squared and a minus 2y, and I'll leave a little space. Equals, over here I end up with a 21. And now I do my b divided by 2 and square it. 6 divided by 2 is 3. 3 squared is 9. So I add a 9 right here. Negative 2 divided by 2 is negative 1. Negative 1 squared is a 1. So I add a 1 to this side. And whatever I do to one side, I have to do the other side. So I add the 9 and the 1 to the other side as well. And now I just do a little bit of simplifying. This is going to factor into an x plus 3 squared. This guy factors into a y minus 1 squared. Over here, I add all this together. It looks like it gives me a 31. And so now I need to identify my center and my radius. The center is going to be negative 3, 1. Again, I take the opposite of each of those. This one is a little bit weird because I have a r squared equaling a 31. I take the square root of each side, so I find out that r equals, well, I'm just going to have to write this as a decimal approximation. It looks like it's going to be somewhere around a 5.6. And now when I graph this thing, I'm just doing a little bit of an estimate, so I go to negative 3, 1, which is right here, and I count 5.6 in every direction. Going to be right around there. I'm just counting in each direction. Well, this one's going to be off my graph just a little bit. And then I do my best. I draw the best graph that I can draw, the best circle that I can draw. I just try to make it look like a circle. Okay? And that's it. So again, I put this thing in standard form by completing the square twice. I identify my center, my radius. I count the radius in each direction after plotting the center, and I draw the best circle that I can draw. And that's it.